Hello, everyone. Today I will be presenting on gender, nature versus nurture. We will understand the difference between sex and gender, how gender roles developed over time, and how the concept of women empowerment has evolved. We begin with two important terms sex and gender. These terms are often confused and used interchangeably, but they are fundamentally different. Understanding this difference is essential to understanding the entire topic. Sex refers to a person's biological classification. It is determined at birth based on physical features and reproductive organs. Individuals are categorized as male, female, or intersex. This classification is completely natural. It is decided by nature, not by humans, and there is no personal or social choice involved. Gender, on the other hand, is a social and cultural construct. It includes the roles, behaviors, and expectations that society assigns to individuals. These roles are created and shaped by family, society, and culture, not by biology. We can clearly see gender as a social construct through everyday examples. For instance, pink is associated with girls and blue with boys, but this is not natural. Similarly, phrases like boys don't cry or women are homemakers are not biological truths. They are social teachings that are passed down through generations. So we can summarize. Nature, sex, refers to biological differences. Nurture, gender, refers to social conditioning. This means that gender roles are learned over time, not something we are born with. In society, we commonly see men as breadwinners, strong and dominant, women as caregivers, emotional, and homemakers. These roles are assigned by society and are not biologically fixed. This brings us to an important question. Where did these gender roles come from? Why is the male seen as the provider and the female as dependent? To answer this, we look at the evolution of gender roles. The explanation comes from a theoretical perspective based on anthropology and archaeological evidence. It is not a perfect or absolute theory, but it helps us understand how gender roles may have developed over thousands of years. If we do or see something repeatedly over thousands of years, it becomes a part of our genetic coding. In early era of environmentalism, humans lived like animals. They depended on hunting and gathering and lived in caves. Their main goal was survival in a harsh environment. Survival required physical strength, agility, and risk-taking. After some time, the female became pregnant through a natural biological process, which slightly reduced her mobility and agility. Because of this, she stayed in the cave to rest, while the male took on the responsibility of gathering food and hunting for both of them. Due to biological differences, men performed hunting, protection, and risk taking tasks. Women stayed in safer places, especially during pregnancy, due to limited mobility. Since men were bringing food, they became economic providers as his physical condition allowed him to move more freely. Meanwhile, the female, staying in the shelter, began managing the living space, cleaning, organizing, and even planting seeds. Over time, these roles gradually shaped the idea of the male as the breadwinner and the female as the homemaker. Women, staying in one place, likely began planting seeds and managing food. This suggests that women may have played an important role in the development of early agriculture. After the child was born, a key psychological principle comes into play. A key psychological concept here is proximity begets love. This means that the more time people spend together, the stronger their emotional bond becomes. A newborn is biologically dependent on the mother for feeding and care, so the child remains close to her most of the time. Because of this constant closeness, a strong emotional attachment naturally develops between them. We can observe this even in everyday life. Children feel closer to those who raise them, and relationships may weaken when people are physically distant. In this early setting, the child's continuous proximity to the mother strengthens her affection, giving rise to the deep sense of maternal love, warmth, and care. This care developed because the baby was extremely fragile and required gentle, constant attention. The mother, staying close to the child, took on these sensitive tasks that required patience rather than physical strength. This is how the concept of mother's love developed.
Meanwhile, the male was engaged in physically demanding activities like hunting and protecting, which gradually made his body stronger over time. This natural division of roles influenced human physical development and social behavior. The male became associated with strength and provision, while the female became associated with care, warmth, and nurturing. This is how the ideas of the male as the breadwinner and the female as the source of love and care gradually emerged. When the child was born, it was male, which raises an important question about the idea of women being called the weaker sex, biologically. This label does not fully hold true. In fact, medical evidence shows that male infants have a higher mortality rate than female infants, especially in early human history, before modern medicine. This suggests that at birth, females are often more resilient. Additionally, females generally have a higher life expectancy and a greater tolerance for pain compared to males. These factors indicate that, in many biological aspects, survival, longevity, and endurance, females may actually be stronger. So, the question remains, if this is the case, why were women labeled as the weaker sex? This is something that can be explored further. Women were labeled weaker because strength was associated with physical labor and risk-taking. Men's roles were more visible and physically demanding, leading society to form this perception. When males went out for hunting or gathering, they faced greater risks from wild animals and harsh conditions, which increased their chances of death. They died more frequently. As a result, more women survived, creating a population imbalance. In some cases, this left females and their children without support, since caring for a child limited mobility. It became difficult for a mother to hunt or gather effectively while also protecting the child. In such situations, another surviving male might take responsibility for providing for more than one female and their children. Over time, this imbalance in numbers and the need for protection and provision may have contributed to the early emergence of polygamous arrangements, where one male supported multiple females and their families. Polygamy can be divided into two types: polygyny, where one man has multiple wives, and polyandry, where one woman has multiple husbands. Historically, polygyny has been more common across societies. One explanation often given is that, over time, there were relatively more females than males due to higher risks faced by men in activities like hunting and conflict. In such conditions, polygyny became more practical and socially accepted. If the situation had been reversed, with more males than females, then polyandry might have become more common and widely accepted. Instead, as time passed, the control of males over females began to strengthen. When one male was responsible for multiple women, he often started to dominate decision-making and distribution of resources, rewarding obedience and discouraging resistance. This pattern can be understood through the idea of conditioning shaping behavior through rewards and punishments. Just as early humans learned to tame wild animals like elephants by controlling their food and gradually training them to obey, similar patterns of control and dependence developed in human relationships. Over time, this led to increasing authority of males and the shaping of social structures where power and control became concentrated in their hands. Over time, this control led to fear and dominance, which eventually created negative attitudes toward women. Known as misogyny, women became symbols of power and status, and gradually turned into commodities. In early human groups, competition among males for resources and partners was common, and conflicts sometimes resulted in one male gaining control over more people and resources. In such settings, women became symbols of power and status and were treated as part of a man's social and economic power, contributing to their commodification and later objectification. These developments gradually shaped early social hierarchies and gender roles, marking a transition toward more structured forms of human society and the early beginnings of civilization. With the rise of civilization came language, laws, moral codes, and social institutions. which were largely shaped by men due to their dominant position in society at the time. As a result, many early systems and ideas reflected male perspectives, and women were often excluded or given limited roles. Societies became male-dominated. Even thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau spoke of freedom in ways that primarily centered on men, highlighting this imbalance. Over time, these structures reinforce patterns of gender inequality, where social roles were shaped not just by biology, but also by cultural and societal influences. This illustrates the broader concept of gender versus sex, nature versus nurture, showing how biological differences, combined with environmental conditions, contributed to the development of distinct roles for men and women in early human societies.